The time is 7:44 a.m. Good morning. The news headline. Obasonjo blasts Buhari. You're borrowing very stupid. Why pile up debt for the next generation? The news in full. Ex-president of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasonjo, has frowned at the way the federal government is taking loans. According to the ex-president, borrowing for recurrent expenditure is foolish. In a video interview with Channels Television, Obasonjo said that borrowing and accumulating debt for the next generations to come is criminal. Obasonjo said in his interview that if you want to build a commercial house and you go and borrow money and you have 50% of your own money and you borrow 50% and in 5 years you pay the 50% that you borrowed, that is a wise thing to do. But if you have to go and borrow money for you to be able to feed yourself and your family, that is a stupid thing to do. So if you are borrowing for recurrent expenditure, it is the height of foolery. If you are borrowing for development that can pay itself, that is understandable. Then how long will it pay itself? But we are borrowing and accumulating debt for the next generation and the next generation after them. It is criminal, to put it mildly. What are we borrowing for? When I came into government and was elected president, we were spending 3.5 billion naira to service debt. And even with that, our quantum of debt was not going down. The administration of President Muhammadu Buhari has borrowed a total of 21 trillion naira within 6 years. Data from the Debt Management Office showed that at the end of March 2021, Nigeria's public debt hit a total of 33.12 trillion naira, which means in the last 6 years under President Buhari, the country's debt rose by 21 trillion naira. As of the end of June 2015, 1 month after the present regime came into power, the country's debt profile stood at 12.12 trillion naira. It also means that the country's debt profile has risen by 173.27% within the 6-year period. Nigeria's total debt stock includes the debt stock of the federal government, the 36 states, and the Federal Capital Territory. However, most of the debts were contracted by the federal government. And the news analysis is that the ex-president of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasonjo, has actually, frowned at the way that President Muhammadu Buhari's regime has been, taking loans for a while now. He's saying that a wise thing to do is actually if you are, spending, if you're actually borrowing for something that will pay off later or something that would actually, can pay itself after borrowing the particular loan. But, borrowing money for you to be able to feed yourself or feed your family, that is a very stupid thing to do. He said if one is borrowing for recurrent expenditure, that it is actually foolery. And he said that if you're actually borrowing for development that can pay itself after a whole long while, then that is understandable. But for the debt being accumulated by the Buhari regime, that it is actually criminal, because to put it mildly, there is no understandable facts, there is no rational facts for what we are borrowing for. Because when you keep on borrowing for the next generation, it is actually criminal. He then cited an instance of when he came into the government and was elected as president, that there was about 3.5 billion naira debt that his regime was servicing, yet the quantum of the debt was not going down. However, the Buhari administration now has borrowed a total of 21 trillion naira just within 6 years. And the data from the Debt Management Office had showed that at the end of March 2021, that Nigeria's debt March 2021 at total 33.12 trillion naira, which means that in the last 6 years, President Muhammadu Buhari's regime has actually made the country's debt to rise by 21 trillion naira. And at the end of June, 1 month after the present regime came into power, the country's debt profile about 12.12 trillion naira, which means that it has risen by 173.27% within 6 years. And the ex-president Olusegun Obasanjo has actually condemned this act to be criminal, saying that it is actually a foolish thing to do. And you know that aside ex-president Olusegun Obasonjo, there will also be a whole lot of people that are against this debt by the Buhari regime, because he, after seeking the Senate approval on additional borrowing an incongruous 33 trillion naira debt hanging over the neck of the current and future generations, the Buhari regime again still, asked for another about 17 trillion naira again. And the breakdown, according to the Budget Office medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper from 2015, showed that the current administration incurred 7.63 trillion naira in domestic debt from June 2015. And also, on external borrowings, the administration increased the nation's debt from 7.3 billion naira in 2015 to 28.57 billion as of December 2020. Therefore, to counter outcries over mounting debt, government officials have urged that Nigeria's national debt is not too high when calculated as a percentage of gross domestic product (GDP). Renomokri has actually been the aide and spokesperson to Goodluck Jonathan has been against these loans by the Buhari regime, saying that it is actually uncalled for and irrational. Economists too has argued that wise borrowing occur when they are applied to stimulate the production of goods for export. We understand that part of the current loan will be used to revive the Ajaokuta Steel Company, which has remained epileptic since the 1980s, though it is 90% completed. In this case, we call on governments to ensure the loan is applied effectively to shore up steel productions for domestic use and for export. Unless borrowing translates to measurable economic development, it is nothing but the enslavement of the future generation, who would have to repay the money. And this has been the tragedy of the country over the years, which is why caution must be applied in collecting loans. Also, if previous loans have led to economic growth, Nigeria would have by now joined the ranks of developing countries like Brazil, South Korea, India, Pakistan, Malaysia, Indonesia, and even Singapore, with whom Nigeria began economic development plans in the 1970s. With half-hearted approaches to economic development, we have failed to follow through in the implementation of programs and projects for which we have accumulated debts. Some project costs were inflated, while executions were frustrated due to corruption. Just as many more have been abandoned, and this is not how to develop our country, Nigeria. Thanks for listening. Good morning.